By the time Inigo unlatched the shutters, the plaza looked less like a food stall queue and more like a parade. Nobles under parasols stood beside farmers still dusted from the fields. Adventurers clinked coin purses and told tales loudly enough to make sure everyone heard them. Children darted between booths, playing at being burger knights with wooden spoons as swords. Rico nearly dropped the chalkboard when he saw it. "Gods," he whispered, eyes wide. "We're a festival." "Then keep your feet," Inigo told him. He slid the day's pouch of coins into the drawer, tied his apron, and breathed in the still air before the oil began its symphony. "Festivals end. We're building something that doesn't." Lyra stepped up beside him, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. She scanned the crowd like a commander surveying a battlefield. "They're here for the food and the platinums," she said. "Half will stay because of the food, half because of the story. Both are dangerous." Inigo lit the fryer anyway. "Stories don't kill you. Hunger does." The first batch of chicken went in with a hiss. The smell rippled through the line like a banner unfurled, and a cheer rose as though the crowd had just seen a victory charge. The morning brought more nobles than any day before. Silks and brocade gleamed among the peasants' wool. A young lord with an emerald pin stepped forward, handed his coin with exaggerated grace and declared, "I have no interest in guild politics, but I could not ignore word of platinum fried chicken." He received his basket with a nod as solemn as a knight receiving a sword. One bite later, all decorum melted and grease dripped unashamedly down his jeweled cuff. His laughter carried down the line, and servants took notes as though the seasoning itself was a state secret. "Are we feeding them or arming them?" Lyra muttered under her breath. "Both," Inigo replied, salting another basket. By mid-morning, groups of academy students crowded the benches, slates in hand. They scribbled not only orders but ratios, oil temperatures, and descriptions of mouthfeel that made Inigo snort. One girl raised her hand like she was in class and asked, "Do you add the salt before or after the second fry?" "After," Inigo said, sliding another tray forward. "Always after." They nodded furiously, etching the words like commandments. A boy muttered, "This will be on the exam." Lyra leaned over the counter, amused. "Your burger is about to become theory." "Then may they pass," Inigo said, flipping patties without missing a beat. Adventurers and tales. Adventurers filled the afternoon rush, louder and rougher than any noble but no less eager. They bought food in twos and threes, boasting about how many they could eat. One party of 4 slammed their tankards down on the counter and demanded, "The platinum combo." "There's no such thing," Lyra said flatly. "There is now," one declared, grinning wide. So Inigo improvised. 2 doubles, a basket of fries and a full order of fried chicken, served with 3 sauces. The adventurers devoured it like wolves and then sang its praises in the middle of the plaza until others began ordering the platinum combo, as though it had been on the menu for years. Rico chalked it onto the board with a flourish, underlining it twice. Not all the attention was welcome. The baker from across the plaza, who had once glared and later bought fries, now leaned against his stall with narrowed eyes as McCronald's line dwarfed his. By noon he had doubled his own bread prices in a bid to keep up, but it only made his stall emptier. His mutters of upstarts carried farther than he realized. "Think he'll try something foolish?" Lyra asked, watching him between orders. "Probably," Inigo said. "But bread alone doesn't win a city. Salt and grease do." Still he noted the tension. Fame was as sharp as a blade. It cut both ways. By dusk they had run out again. Not just of chicken but of fries, buns, even the last shred of lettuce. The stall's counters were bare and still the line stretched down the plaza. Rico stood on the bench, hands raised. "That's all for today." Groans rose from the crowd, then applause, then chants. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow." Inigo leaned against the fryer, sweat streaking his temples, body aching in the good way. Lyra slumped onto the counter, grease smudged and smiling despite herself. "We can't keep this up," she said. "We can," Inigo corrected. "But we'll need more hands." Rico, flushed with pride and exhaustion, blurted, "We should hire a bard. Someone to sing the menu." Lyra groaned, but Inigo only chuckled. "Not the worst idea." That night the stall shutters locked, the 3 of them sat with tea and the day's coin. It was heavy enough to make the drawer groan. Fame had turned into fortune overnight. Lyra eyed it warily. This much gold makes people stupid. Then we'll spend it wisely, Inigo said. Supplies first. Upgrades second. And maybe... He trailed off, thoughtful. Maybe what? She asked. He sipped his tea, gazed distant. Maybe more stalls. One day. Before she could argue, a knock rattled their door. A guild clerk stood outside, face pale in the lamplight. He bowed quickly. Forgive the hour, but the council requests your presence tomorrow. A matter of recognition. Lyra's expression darkened. We've had enough recognition. The clerk only bowed again, retreating into the night. Inigo closed the door softly. It seems the city isn't done with us. The next morning the plaza would be louder still. Nobles would send more servants. Students would copy more recipes. Adventurers would invent more combos. The council's eyes would sharpen, weighing whether food could sway a city as much as swords. And Inigo knew. Every tray, every fry, every golden piece of chicken carried more than flavor now. It carried their names. Lyra leaned against the table, rubbing at her eyes. We wanted steady work. Now we have an army. Inigo raised his cup. Then let's feed them. She laughed, low and weary, but lifted her cup to his. The toast rang soft in the lamplight, a promise wrapped in grease and salt. The knock came before the shutters were up. Rico nearly sent the chalkboard clattering when he jumped. We're closed until... He stopped when he saw the runner in the guild's gray vest, sweat dark hair plastered to his brow, a sealed strip of black wax in his hand. For Inigo and Lyra, the runner said, chest heaving. Guildmaster Thorn requests your presence. First bell. Lyra slid the bolt, took the summons and held it up to the light. The wax bore the hammer and stag seal, pressed deep. She didn't need to break it to know what it said. Platinum summons, she murmured. Inigo set a hand on the frame and exhaled through his nose. We knew fame would bring more than lines. Lines are easier, Rico said, trying to sound brave and failing adorably. Inigo clapped his shoulder. You and Maddie take the morning. We'll be back before the lunch rush, if we can. Maddie arrived at a run just as Lyra tied her hair back. I brought extra buns, she said, lifting a basket. Then she took one look at the seal and her mouth made a small, oh. Is that? It's that, Lyra said. You two can handle it? Rico puffed himself up. We fed a city yesterday. You fed a small village, Lyra corrected, but she was smiling. Today you'll feed a town. Inigo scribbled quick notes on the prep slate. Buns 1.5 midday, salt resupply, oil X3, and tucked a small coin pouch into Maddie's hand. Emergency petty cash. Don't let Rico buy a loot. Rico looked wounded. One time. Exactly one time too many, Inigo said and flipped the Open at 10 placard. They locked the stall, crossed the plaza and took the broad steps to the guild hall 2 at a time. Inside, the usual clamor seemed to split around them, the way water parts around rocks. Elise caught sight of them from behind the desk, lifted a hand and mouthed, He's waiting. Up the stair, down the hall. The door marked Guildmaster bore a fresh nick near the latch, as if it had been closed 1,000 times too fast in the last week. Inigo knocked twice. Enter, came the familiar baritone. Thorn stood behind his desk, sleeves rolled, a map weighted by 2 small lead dragons. The window threw a sheet of morning into the room, cutting the white in his hair to silver. He didn't waste words. Congratulations on surviving celebrity, he said dryly. You're harder to reach now than half the court. We're 5 doors down, Lyra said, taking the chair but perching on the edge as if her body hadn't decided yet to stay. Thorn slid a folder across the desk. Not black, dark brown, edges scuffed. Serious but not ceremonial. Platinum contract. Time sensitive. Inigo didn't touch it yet. Parameters. Short. Discreet. Effective. Thorn tapped the map, where the high road north of Elandra unfurled like a ribbon on stone. His finger landed on a gouge labeled Harrow's Notch. You remember the glass on the cliff cut, the mirror signal? The gray pennants. Hard to forget, Lyra said. They've grown bolder. Intelligence says they've consolidated under a man calling himself Vane. Thorn's mouth took a shape that suggested he'd bitten into something bitter. He's a former caravan captain who learned every way to slow a wagon without touching it. Now he uses those lessons on us. Ambushes? Inigo asked. Tolls. The civilized word for it. He posts watchers with glass at every blind curve from Harrow's Notch to the old quarry road. A caravan rolls in. He has 5 minutes warning to put a tree across the path or a lame mule in the right place. No blood unless someone refuses. Then, Thorn's eyes flattened. Accidents. Lyra's jaw shifted. You want us to cut the head? I want you to cut the net, Thorn said. Head if you can. Net for certain. We have a large convoy scheduled in 2 days. Alchemical reagents, steel billets, grain. If Vane thinks he can set a tax before winter, he will. I'd rather he learn the opposite. Inigo finally opened the folder. Inside, a sketch of Harrow's Notch, a list of reported sighting points each marked with a tiny X, a rough count of men 15 to 20, weapons, crossbows, boar spears, a rumor of spark salt flares, likely stolen from some careless quartermaster, and a symbol, a gray pennant with a slash of white. Any noble crests behind them? Inigo asked without looking up. Thorn's silence was answer enough. If you find proof, he said after a beat, bring it to me, not the square. Discretion, Lyra said. Platinum discretion, Thorn corrected. I can't cover you if you break half the city's illusions in broad daylight. But I won't ask you to pretend black is gray. Inigo traced Harrow's Notch with a fingertip, thinking the way he did when the kitchen quieted and only the sizzle of oil spoke. Simple physics, timing, choreography. What about terrain? Cliff on one side, drop on the other, Thorn said. Not much room to maneuver until you reach the fork. There's an abandoned quarry spur with scrub cover, where you routed yesterday. They'll expect wary men to hug that. We won't hug, Lyra said. Thorn smiled, the faintest show of teeth. No, you won't. He slid 2 tokens across the desk, small brass discs stamped with the guild stag. Requisition. Fuel for your cart. Supplies. And, he hesitated, then added a folded parchment, a letter of indemnity. If a captain with the wrong friends questions why you're out past the gates with weapons, flash that and speak the words, platinum prerogative. Do it once only. After that, you look like you're hiding behind a shield you didn't earn. We earned this one, Lyra said, a little heat under the words. You did, Thorn agreed. Which is why I'm giving you this job and not a squad of 12 who would take 3 days to argue tactics. Constraints? Inigo asked. Minimal collateral, Thorn said. The road is the city's artery. Don't break it to save it. Capture or kill? Lyra asked. Prefer capture of Vane, Thorn said. He's clever. Clever men talk if you give them the right silence. The rest, your judgment. Elise knocked once and slipped in with 3 tin cups of tea. Her eyes flicked to the map, then to the tokens, then to Inigo and Lyra. You're going to embarrass them, she said like a benediction. We're going to make traffic move, Inigo said. Elise smirked and set the cups down. Lyra took hers and drank without waiting, as if the heat might steady her pulse. Inigo only held his, letting the steam curl into his face. Thorn leaned back in his chair, the map between them weighted like a battlefield. You leave tonight. The convoy departs at dawn 2 days hence, which gives you 1 full day to prepare ground. Choose wisely where you cut. Lyra's fingers drummed once against her cup. You want us invisible until the last minute. I want you effective, Thorn corrected. Invisible would be a kindness, but fear works too. Make them think the road has teeth. Inigo stood, rolling the map closed with crisp precision. We'll need more than luck and oil. Which is why, Thorn said, reaching under the desk, you're requisitioned for this. He placed a wrapped bundle on the table. Cloth peeled back to reveal 3 things. A small case of sparkstones, a coil of braided wire fine as hair, and a set of compact steel caltrops, each wicked point glinting like frozen fire. Road toys, Lyra murmured, picking up one of the caltrops and balancing it on her fingertip. Non-lethal until a horse finds them, Thorn said. I trust you to place them where only your enemies walk. Elise's eyes gleamed. They'll regret ever thinking wood across a road was clever. Inigo repacked the kit with deliberate care, as if arranging kitchen knives. We'll return what we don't use. No, Thorn said. You won't. The weight of that hung a moment, then dissolved as he pushed the folder aside and lifted his own tea. Platinum prerogative. Your call. Your consequences. Lyra rose. Then we'll start now. By dusk, the JV was loaded. Extra fuel tins lashed to the side, crates of supplies wedged between tied-down nets, and the requisitioned gear stowed with the same care Inigo gave his fryer baskets. Lyra checked her bowstring twice, then slid a fresh coil of arrows into the rack behind her seat. "You know," she said as she buckled in, "this isn't so different from prepping for a lunch rush." Inigo grinned faintly. "Except here, if we burn the order, we don't get to send out another plate." The road north lay quiet, dust pale under a sliver of moon. They rolled with lights hooded, engine rumbling low, an iron beast slipping between hedgerows. Villages shrank behind them, lanterns winking out until only fields stretched on either side, flat and watchful. At Harrow's Notch the world changed. The ground rose, cutting into cliffs that flanked the road like jaws. On one side, sheer rock, scarred by old quarry picks. On the other, a drop into mist and broken stone. A perfect choke point. A perfect trap. Lyra whistled low. "Feels like walking into a throat." "Then let's give the throat indigestion," Inigo said. They parked off the spur where scrub clawed at old stone. Inigo killed the engine. Silence rushed in, wind through pine, the creak of settling cliff, a raven croak somewhere above. Lyra moved first, scouting the upper ledge. She crawled the ridgeline like a shadow, marking sightlines with a stub of chalk on stone. Inigo followed at ground level, measuring distances the way cooks measured time. Steps, breaths, heartbeats. Here a curve that would hide a cart until it was already committed. There a patch of road soft with old erosion where caltrops could vanish until hooves screamed. By midnight the place looked the same as before, but their invisible handprints were everywhere. Wires strung waist-high across a side path, spark stones buried in shallow cups of dirt to throw up a wall of light at the right strike. Caltrops seated in a scatter, only they knew the safe way through. Lyra crouched at the bend and whispered, "Vane will expect scared guards, not traps that think." Inigo placed the last stone and wiped his hands on his trousers. "Then he'll be disappointed. I warned him I like physics." Dawn brought a mist that rolled off the cliffs like steam from a fryer. They lay low, gel TV hidden under netting and brush, the air thick with damp. Lyra perched on a ledge, bow across her knees, eyes scanning the southern trail. Inigo sat in the cab, radio set to guild frequency, watching the convoy markers glow faint on the map board. The hours stretched. Ravens wheeled above. Once a deer picked its way across the road, ears twitching. Otherwise only waiting. Lyra broke the silence. "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "The simplicity. Just hunting for meat, cooking for ourselves. No lines, no guilds, no platinums." Inigo thought about it, then shook his head. "No. I miss quiet sometimes. But never small." He studied him, lips quirking. "You're hungrier than you look." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. By late morning the first rumble came. Hooves, wagon wheels, the steady creak of leather harness. The convoy rolled into view. 6 wagons, 24 guards, banners of the alchemist and blacksmith guilds snapping damp in the breeze. And above, faint but certain, a wink of glass on the ridge. Lyra's eyes sharpened. "Signal." Inigo nodded. "Wait." Minutes later shadows moved ahead. Men with axes and ropes dragged toward the road's narrowest pinch, intent on laying timber. Others lingered with spears, crossbows slung. At their center, a man in a leather coat the color of dust, sharp-faced, hawk-eyed, barking orders. "Vane." Lyra's bow came up, arrow knocked. Inigo's hand hovered over the trigger for the sparkstone line. "Not yet," he said. The ambushers moved fast, practiced. The first tree leaned, groaning toward the road. Wagon guards shouted, pulling reins, tension rippling like heat before a storm. "Now," Inigo said. He triggered the buried stones. The world erupted in white fire, flare bright, searing the mist today. Men staggered, blinded, axes clattering. Horses reared, but this time it was the ambushers who panicked. Lyra's arrow sang, pinning a gray pennant to the trunk before it could fall. "Second warning," she called, voice carrying clear. "There won't be a third." Inigo gunned the jail TV, brush flying as the machine roared onto the road. Its bulk thundered between wagons and cliffs, a steel beast rising from mist. Guards cheered, stunned, as the convoy suddenly had a wall with teeth. Vane cursed, blinking against the afterimage, hand reaching for a blade. He froze when the jail TV swerved and stopped dead across the choke point, engines snarling like a predator. Lyra loosed another arrow, this one biting the ground a breath from his boot. Choose, she said, tone flat. Run or rot. The silence cracked. Men dropped weapons, stumbling back. One tried to flee down the spur, only to shriek as a caltrip found his boot. Panic spread faster than orders. Vane stood rigid, fists clenched, fury and pride dueling across his face. For a moment it looked like he'd charge anyway. Then his shoulders slumped. He spat in the dirt and raised his hands. Another day, he said hoarsely. Not if you keep this job, Lyra answered. The convoy rolled past, wagons creaking, guards staring in awe. The JLTV idled like a watchful hound. Inigo leaned on the wheel, eyes tracking every shadow until the last cart cleared. Lyra climbed down, bow still strung, and met his gaze. Nets cut. He nodded. Head to if Thorn wants it. They bound Vane with the very rope meant for timber. He glared but said nothing, silence sharper than curses. As the guild banners vanished north, the road fell quiet again. The smell of spent sparks hung like burned sugar. Inigo exhaled long and steady. Traffic moves. Lyra looked down the empty stretch of road, then back at him. For now. He didn't argue. They loaded Vane into the back, cleared the traps and turned the JLTV south. The city would wake to wagons arriving on time, never knowing the throat had been cleared for them by a cook and an archer with platinum seals in their pockets. The JLTV rattled down the high road with its usual mechanical growl, steady as a heartbeat. The mist thinned as they descended, cliffs giving way to open fields and farm roads where peasants paused mid-harvest to gape at the machine's bulk. The morning sun caught on the steel, casting long shadows ahead of them, like a herald warning Alandra of what rolled its way home. In the back, Vane shifted against the ropes. His mouth was gagged, but his eyes burned with unspoken curses. Lyra kept her bow across her lap anyway. She didn't trust silence, not from him. He'll try something, she murmured. Inigo, hands steady on the wheel, didn't glance back. Not with those knots. Knots hold rope. They don't hold pride. He allowed a small grunt at that. Then we'll bring both to Thorn. Midday found them passing the first trade villages. Children ran alongside for a stretch, waving until their mothers scolded them back to the fields. Merchants stopped carts to stare, eyes flicking from the JLTV's armor to the bound figure visible through the rear slats. Recognition traveled quick. Whispers followed in their wake. Lyra shifted uneasily. Word will spread faster than us. Good, Inigo said. The guild needs stories more than reports. Stories travel where seals can't. By the time they reached the river crossing, a patrol of city guards flagged them down. The captain approached warily, eyes narrowing at the sight of Vane tied in the back. What's this? He asked. Lyra flipped the folded parchment from her belt, breaking the seal with a sharp motion. Platinum prerogative. Her voice carried the authority of the words as if they weighed more than steel. The captain read, blinked once and snapped a salute. Forgive me. Proceed. He didn't ask another question. The JLTV rolled on. Alandra's walls rose in the late afternoon light, towers gilded by the sun like spears tipped in flame. The gates parted at the sight of the machine, guards stepping aside with more respect than curiosity. By now the city had learned to expect the unexpected when the JLTV returned. Rico was outside Mcronald's, chalkboard in hand, when he saw them pass. His eyes widened, mouth opening to shout, but Inigo gave the smallest shake of his head. The boy swallowed his words and instead bolted inside to spread the sight like wildfire. Straight to the guild hall they went. The machine growled to a halt in the courtyard, and the commotion was immediate. Apprentices gawked. Veterans frowned. Clerks whispered to each other about paperwork that would soon need writing. Elise was already on the steps. By the gods, she muttered, eyes flicking from Vane's bound figure to the expressionless calm of the two platinums climbing out of the cab. You really don't do half measures. No refunds either, Inigo said dryly. They hauled Vane between them, his boots dragging against stone. Every eye followed as they marched him into the guild hall, through the atrium, up the stairs, down the hall. The murmurs swelled with every step. Thorn was waiting, of course. He always seemed to know when the storm would arrive. His desk was clear this time, map folded, tea cooling in one corner. Report, he said. Inigo shoved Vane into the chair opposite. The man slumped, gagged, but his glare did the speaking for him. Lyra gave the short version. Glass signals, tree trap, net cut, head taken. Efficient, soldier-like. Thorn listened without interruption. When she finished, he regarded Vane with a long, steady stare. You cost the city blood. You cost it coin. And for what? A banner. Vane spat through the gag, the sound wet and defiant. Thorn's jaw tightened. He looked to Inigo. Did he say anything? Not with words, Inigo said. Then he'll learn. Thorn stood, signaled with 2 fingers. Guards entered, guild guards, not city. Quiet men in plain leather, the kind who carried orders like scripture. They hauled Vane up by the arms and marched him out. He struggled once, twice, then went still when the ropes bit harder. The door shut. Silence returned. Clean, Thorn said at last. Minimal disruption. Wagons reached the northern gate this afternoon without delay. You did what was required. And what wasn't, Lyra said. Thorn's eyes flicked to her, sharp. She didn't flinch. You cut the head, he admitted. I asked only for the net. That's acceptable. Inigo leaned against the desk, folding his arms. What happens to him? Thorn's face revealed nothing. That's not your concern. It is, Lyra pressed. We're not errand runners. We're platinums. You don't bind a man like that and then toss him in a cellar. Not without telling us why. A muscle in Thorn's jaw ticked. For a heartbeat it seemed he might rebuke her. Then he exhaled slowly. Interrogation. Then tribunal. Quiet. No spectacle. If he talks, we'll know who backed him. If he doesn't. His shrug was colder than stone. He won't trouble the road again. That seemed to satisfy her, or at least stop her questions. She sat, bow across her knees, and let the silence hold. Thorn turned to Inigo. And you? Inigo's gaze was steady, unreadable. I'm thinking about dinner. Thorn almost smiled. Almost. Go. Rest. The city owes you more than coin, but coin is what I can give. Your account has been credited. Double rate, hazard included. He gestured them toward the door. Elise will see to the paperwork. And Inigo, Lyra. His voice lowered. You've proven again what the guild always suspected. You're not just assets. You're examples. That frightens people. It should. Use it wisely. The air outside felt lighter, though perhaps only because the weight of Thorn's office was gone. Elise caught them on the stairs, folder in hand. Hazard double, she said, confirming the guildmaster's words. Then with a sly grin, and you've got the whole hall whispering already. Platinum celebrity with an actual capture? The bards will need extra ink tonight. Lyra groaned softly. I'd rather they sing about the food. Give it time, Elise said. You're feeding the city 2 ways now. Inigo tucked the folder under his arm and pushed through the guild doors. Evening had begun to spread across the plaza, lanterns flaring to life one by one. People turned at the sight of them emerging, platinums, dust on their boots, calm on their faces. A cheer rose unbidden, quick and raw. Lyra stiffened and used to the attention. Inigo only raised a hand once, then kept walking. Dinner? He asked her, quiet enough for only her to hear. She nodded. Dinner. Dinner that night was quiet, the way battles always ended best. Inigo set the skillet on the stove, the scent of sizzling garlic and onions filling the cramped kitchen. Lyra leaned against the table, bow unstrung and propped in the corner, her posture loose but her eyes sharp, like a soldier who had learned the body could rest even when the mind refused. You cook after everything, she said at last. Inigo stirred the pan, brow furrowed in concentration. Cooking makes sense. Heat time measure. Physics doesn't lie. People do. Her lips quirked faintly. And food never talks back. Unless you burn it. The steam curled upward, carrying warmth through the little room. Outside, the streets still buzzed with the leftover energy of the cheer they'd walked through. Even here, away from the guild plaza, they could hear faint voices singing their names like they were already half in the songs of bards. Lyra rubbed at her temple. It's too much. Too fast. You wanted them to sing about the food, Inigo reminded her. She gestured toward the window where the hum of voices carried faint but steady. They're not singing about the food. They're singing about us. Inigo slid the pan off the fire, portioning the meal into 2 bowls. Then let's give them both. The next day the plaza was thicker than ever. Word of the capture had spread overnight. faster than fire in a dry field. Bards had already begun composing verses. Students scribbled accounts on parchment, embellishing until road bandits had become a warlord's army, and ambush had become a siege of fire and steel. At Mcronald's the line began before dawn. Nobles sent servants to hold places. Apprentices from the Mages' Academy debated the seasoning of the fried chicken as though it were alchemy, and common townsfolk pressed together just to see the two platinums behind the counter. Rico nearly burst at the seams. "They're chanting out there," he whispered as he scrawled the day's menu. "Your names. Like your generals returning from war." Lyra tightened her apron, muttering under her breath. "Feels more like livestock on parade." Inigo tied his apron slower, calm as stone. "Then let's serve them the feed they want." When they threw open the shutters, the roar was immediate. Cheers, clapping, even a bouquet thrust forward by a blushing noble's daughter. Inigo accepted it without a change in expression, passed it to Rico and went straight to the grill. "Two doubles." Lyra barked, slipping effortlessly into the rhythm. "Fries up." Rico shouted, emboldened by the crowd. The fryer hissed, meat seared, paper crinkled. Orders moved like clockwork. Yet above it all hummed the murmur of legend, people repeating half-true tales of the ambush at Harrow's Notch, each one growing larger with every telling. By midday Elise herself dropped by, ledger in hand. She leaned on the counter, smirking at the chaos. "Platinum ranks selling fried chicken to nobles. If my father were alive he'd say the guild lost its mind." Lyra handed her a basket without breaking stride. "Tell him we're feeding his city better than his council ever did." Elise laughed softly, then lowered her voice. "Thorn says interrogation begins tonight. Vane's already cost half the city sleep and the tribunal won't wait. Don't be surprised if you're summoned again." Inigo slid another patty across the grill. "We didn't bring him back just to watch him rot. If there's a hand behind him we'll need to know it." Elise tilted her head, studying him. "You're taking this too calmly. Cooking helps." She chuckled, pushed off the counter and vanished back into the crowd. That night, with the stall closed and lanterns flickering along their street, Lyra sat cross-legged on the table while Inigo cleaned the fryer. She held a bowstring in her hands, twisting it idly between her fingers. "You ever think about what Thorn said?" she asked. "Which part?" "That we're examples. That people are supposed to follow us. What if we don't want them to?" Inigo wiped his hands on a rag, glanced at her. "Then don't look back. Leadership's not about asking people to follow. It's about walking straight enough that they do anyway." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You sound like a guildmaster." He set the rag down, sat opposite her. "I sound like a cook who's tired of bad orders." They sat in silence a moment, the kind that wasn't empty but full, thick with the weight of what they'd done and what lay ahead. Outside, footsteps echoed, a bard's faint song drifted, and the city kept breathing, unaware of the knife edges being balanced in a small kitchen. It came just past midnight, a knock sharp and deliberate. Rico stirred from his cot, rubbing his eyes, but Lyra was already at the door with an arrow nocked. The figure outside was a guild runner, pale and out of breath. He held a strip of parchment sealed with wax. "For Inigo and Lyra," he gasped. "Guild summons. Tribunal tonight." Lyra broke the seal, scanned the words, and her face tightened. "They want us present." Inigo buckled his belt with slow precision. "Of course they do." The guild hall at night was colder, quieter. Torches burned low, shadows clinging to the corners. In the tribunal chamber, a half-circle of officials sat like judges at a feast, robes heavy, expressions heavier. Vane knelt in the center, wrists chained, face pale but eyes still sharp with pride. Thorn stood at the edge, arms folded. When Inigo and Lyra entered, his eyes flicked to them, then back to the prisoner. "Platinum representatives," the guild scribe intoned. "Witnesses to the capture of Vane of the Notch. Your testimony stands alongside his fate." Lyra spoke first, voice even. She told the story as she had before, clear, stripped of embellishment. Inigo followed, briefer still. "Facts, nothing more." The officials murmured, scratching notes on parchment. One leaned forward, asking, "And his men? Did they resist?" "They broke," Inigo said. "Because of fear?" "Because of physics," he answered flatly. "Fire, steel, timing. They had none of it." A murmur of amusement rippled through the chamber. Thorn's mouth twitched just once. When the testimony ended, silence fell. Then Vane laughed, a sharp, bitter bark. You think you've won? You think cutting me ends the tolls? I was only ever a shadow. There are others higher, richer, better hidden. You'll never cut all the nets. The chamber stiffened. Officials whispered sharply. Lyra's hand tightened on her bow. Inigo just watched, expression unreadable. Thorn stepped forward, voice calm but carrying iron. Then you'll tell us who holds the lines above you. Vane spat blood on the floor. You'll have to dig it out of me. The tribunal voted swiftly after that. Interrogation, confinement, silence. His words had sown enough unease to demand answers, and the guild would get them one way or another. When it ended, Thorn dismissed them with a glance. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow the city will need its cooks again. Outside the night air was cool. Lyra's steps were quick, sharp. He's not lying, she said. There are more. Inigo's jaw was set. There are always more. She stopped, forcing him to meet her gaze. And if the guild drags us into another net? He held her eyes for a long moment. Then we cut again. And with that they walked home in silence, side by side, the weight of platinum heavy on their shoulders, but the scent of tomorrow's bread already pulling them forward. Morning came with the smell of bread and oil drifting through the shutters. Inigo rose first as always. The city's noise had barely begun, only the distant clatter of carts and the cries of gulls along the river. He cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle filling the room. Lyra sat at the table, chin on her hand, eyes half-lidded. She hadn't slept much, though she'd pretended. You're loud, she muttered. Breakfast is loud, he answered. She let the silence stretch before adding, You didn't believe him, did you? Vane. Inigo flipped an egg. I believed enough. Her eyes sharpened. Enough to know he wasn't bluffing. He slid the plate in front of her. Enough to know the guild will ring him until he talks. And when he does, we'll be the ones they call. Lyra pushed the egg around with her fork. And we'll cut again. His answer was quiet. If we must. By mid-morning the plaza was already choked. Nobles in fine cloaks, apprentices scribbling as if they were studying more than recipes, merchants with coin purses heavy enough to jingle even when closed. The chalkboard menu Rico scrawled had no chance to stand still. He wiped and rewrote as dishes sold out faster than they could fry them. Burgers, fries, fried chicken. Sold-out signs scrawled in frustrated flourishes. Slow down. Rico shouted, though his grin betrayed the thrill. Lyra worked the counter with soldier's efficiency, her hands flying through buns and wrappers like arrows loosed from a bow. Yet her eyes flicked now and again toward the crowd, nobles whispering about last night's tribunal, adventurers craning to glimpse the two platinums as if watching beasts in a cage. They're not here for the food, she muttered under her breath. They're here for both, Inigo replied, sliding another batch of chicken into the oil. Never underestimate hunger. Of any kind. By noon the line stretched around the fountain twice. Someone had dragged a lute onto a bench and was already singing a crude ballad about the cook and the archer, who strangled bandits with nets of fire. Lyra grimaced. Better than the truth, Inigo said. Worse, she countered. Truth is quieter. Songs spread faster. A merchant leaned over the counter, breath sweet with wine even at midday. Platinums, he drawled. Tell me, what's it like breaking a man like Vane? Did he cry? Did he beg? Lyra's eyes narrowed, but her voice was ice. He laughed. The merchant blinked, unsettled. She shoved a basket of fries into his hands and moved on. Later, a student asked in awe, What's the secret to fried chicken? Salt, Inigo said, not looking up from the fryer. And more salt. The boy scribbled it down like gospel. Between orders, Elise appeared, ledger tucked under her arm. She didn't order food, only leaned in close. The tribunal continues. He's talking but not cleanly. You'll want to be ready. Ready for what? Lyra asked. For whoever stands above him. Elise's smirk was brittle. And they will stand taller. She vanished before Lyra could press her. By dusk the last potatoes were gone, the oil drained, the stall smelling of grease and triumph. Rico collapsed on his stool, face streaked with flour. Legends shouldn't have to wash dishes, he groaned. You're not a legend, Lyra said, tossing him a rag. Your staff. He groaned louder but scrubbed anyway. Inigo leaned on the counter watching the lanterns flare across the plaza. People still lingered, debating whether the crunch or the seasoning was the true magic. Others sang snatches of the new ballad, laughter writing the notes. Lyra sat opposite him, rubbing at her temple. "It's dangerous," she murmured. "The chicken?" he asked dryly. "The fame." He didn't argue. "Night summons." The knock came later, softer than last night's but no less deliberate. Rico stirred, half asleep, but Lyra was already at the door. A runner again, eyes wide with nerves. He held no parchment this time, only words. "Guildmaster Thorn requests you immediately." Lyra exchanged a look with Inigo. He buckled his belt with the same slow precision as always. "Of course he does." The guild hall at night was a different beast. Torches burned low, shadows thick along the stone. They were led not to the tribunal chamber but to a smaller room, walls lined with maps and sealed scrolls. Thorn stood at the table, eyes hollow with lack of sleep. Elise was there too, her ledger closed for once. Vane spoke, Thorn said without preamble. "Names. Places. Coin trails." He pushed a slip of parchment across the table. Lyra scanned it, frown deepening. "These are nobles." "Not many," Thorn said. "But enough. And all clever enough to hide behind men like Vane." Inigo leaned on the table, scanning the parchment without touching it. "And what does the guild plan to do?" "Not storm mansions," Thorn said flatly. "Not yet. But the council will stall. Debate. Pretend to deliberate while caravans keep bleeding." His eyes cut to them sharp. "You, however, are not bound by council delays." "You want us to cut again," Lyra said. Thorn's silence was answer enough. Elise spoke softly, almost gently. "Your platinums. You choose. But if you walk away, the road bleeds longer. If you act, the city may curse your names, but its traffic moves." Lyra's knuckles whitened on the parchment. "And if the ones above Vane are truly hidden? Then drag them into the light," Thorn said. They left the guild hall past midnight, the city hushed but not asleep. A bard's voice still drifted from some tavern, singing of nets cut and bandits scattered. Lyra's steps were quick, sharp. He wasn't lying. "There are more." Inigo's jaw was set. "There are always more." She stopped, forcing him to meet her gaze. "And if the guild drags us into another net?" He held her eyes for a long moment. "Then we cut again." And with that they walked home in silence, side by side, the weight of platinum heavier than steel, but the promise of tomorrow's bread already pulling them forward. They opened late on purpose. Not by much, just enough to bleed off the impatient morning line that now formed whether the shutters were up or not. Maddie fielded the first knocks with a grin and 2 paper cones of potato ends, for the smallest noses pressed to the glass. Rico chalked the board in neat, proud letters and added beneath the menu, "Back after lunch. Guild business." 2 hours, Lyra told them, bow slung, hair braided high. 3 at most. Brine stays cold. "We'll keep the oil honest," Maddie promised, clacking a lid on the fryer like a salute. They cut the plaza at a trot, drawing scattered applause that Lyra ignored, and Inigo answered with 2 fingers off his cap, the closest he came to a bow. Inside the guild hall, din parted around them. Elise saw them from behind the desk, lifted 1 finger. 1 minute, finished a sentence that made a courier pale, then beckoned. "Not the public boards," she said, already moving. She led them past a curtain of leather strips into a short hall that smelled faintly of old wax. A door with no sign gave to her palm on an iron ring. Inside was a long table, a rack of sealed scroll tubes, and pigeonholes labeled in a clerk's careful hand. The air felt cooler. Even whispers seemed too loud here. "Platinum shelf," Elise said. "Color codes, short briefs, plausible deniability." Her mouth tilted. "Also terrible coffee." Lyra's gaze skimmed the rack. Seals in black, red, blue, green, amber. "Black is clandestine," Elise said. "Red martial, blue diplomacy, green recovery, amber problems that won't pick a lane. You read in room. Break a seal and you either take the job or swear to shut your mouth." "Ready." Inigo nodded. "Show us the ones that won't keep the friar lonely." Elise tapped 4 tubes into a neat row. "Pre-pulled for your sins. Time windows, politics, travel. 1 inch, black wax, ledger thread. Dockward, tonight." A ledger that ties Vane's road game to 3 noble factors is leaving warehouse 3 for the river. False bottom chest. We want the book and, if you can, the cipher ring the factor carries. Quiet. No city watch. Owner. Inigo asked. Mardel. Old family, new friends. Answers to Lord Rindal Aram in daylight, to no one proven after dark. Elise nudged a red-sealed tube. 2 Southmore pair. Wyverns on the aqueduct piers. 2 days out, 1 back. Clean kill, easy write-up, no politics. Lyra's eyes warmed, then cooled as Elise set a blue wax job beside it. Envoy to the Ashwood. Babysit a water rights parley so a baron doesn't talk the forest into war. Boredom with a chance of knives. An amber? Inigo asked. Lace market mint. Counterfeit coppers bleeding the food stalls. Likely an artificer shaving coins for a guild offshoot. Lots of law. Less justice. Elise returned to the black tube. The ledger's a window. Tonight only. The barge Swift Eel casts off its second bell. If it leaves, winter will swallow it. Lyra picked up the black tube and weighed it. Smells like Vane. Exactly, Elise said. Quiet angle. Dock 9 broken crane shadow. Friendly dock warden is Islan. 2 dips of the lamp buys you 60 heartbeats of his inattention. Underdock access through pilings. Roof has a bored man who eats with his mouth open. Mardel keeps his ring by the inkwell when he signs. Inigo cracked the black seal. We'll take tonight. Elise slid over a leather roll. 2 non-lethal smokes, a wax impression kit and a pinch bottle. Seal break powder for ribbon ties you can't cut clean. Don't overuse. Leaves a scent like old apples. She pointed at a map. Underdock guide named Tamsin, short, fast, smarter than the river. Pay her double and she won't invent extra exits. If it goes loud, alley right twice. Cooper's shop with a green smear under the lintel hates Mardel. Use that. Lyra looped the roll to her belt. JLTV. Bean Street only, Elise said. Hide it behind grain stacks. If you need an engine at the dock, the job started wrong. They signed the in-room oath, 5 dull words, and ghosted back through the hall. On the way to the plaza they detoured by the stall. Maddie was fending off 3 scribes with a ladle. Rico practiced throwing a potato and catching it in a basket until Lyra said, "Stop flirting with physics," and his ears went pink. Inigo wrote on the prep slate, "Oil X2 buns 1.5 midday, close early, supplies." He pressed petty cash into Maddie's hand. "If the crowd sours when you close, toss a free fries at the loudest mouth." Chewing is diplomacy. They ate standing, half a burger each and the last unsalted handful of fries, and crossed to Bean Street, where the JV tucked behind a heap of staves and a stalled wagon like a secret that had learned to crouch. Inigo killed the engine. The river changed the city's sound. Chain hiss, gull cackle, wood on wood. Tamsin found them by a coil of tarred rope. A pair of clever eyes and elbows sharper than ethics. "You're late," she said, though they weren't. "Tide eats patience." Lyra flicked her a copper. "We feed it well." "Follow," Tamsin breathed and vanished through a gap that wasn't a gap until you decided to be thinner than pride. Down a slick ladder into a low, wet cathedral of pilings. Warehouse 3. Left room, office above. 2 men, river door, 1 roof chewer, and a crew who thinks spice makes them invisible. Lyra looked up, measuring roofline jumps with her eyes. "I'll take top." Inigo's palms settled on the leather roll. "I'll take the ink." They split. Lyra climbed rings and nail heads like rungs only she could see. The roof sighed under her and then held. A guard's boots scuffed. Teeth clicked wood. Bort. Overconfident. Inigo slid a panel up from the quay's underbelly and stepped into a dark that smelled like pepper and damp ledgers. Up an inside stair, past sacks that read as cumin in his nose and as cover in his head. Leftmost shelf. Third from bottom. Push and lift. The backboard shifted. The book sat there like a secret that had stopped trying to hide. He wrapped it in Elise's roll and tucked it inside his vest. Mardel's office was glass-walled and high, shutters half-drawn to ring river light thin. On the desk, a seal press, a bowl of lemon peels and ink shine with a gold fleck. The ring lay by the quill, fat with confidence. Inigo didn't touch it. He softened a cake of wax against his palm, pressed, rolled, lifted. 1 clean impression. Then a second because kitchens teach redundancy. A third for luck he wouldn't count. The air sweetened, old apples exactly as promised. He fanned the wafers until they stiffened and slid them into the roll with the ledger. Footstep. The latch breathed. Inigo stepped left. The door opened. Mardal filled it. Expensive shirt, cheap surprise. Your lamp's leaking, Inigo said pleasantly. What? Mardal began. A soft tap at the window. Lyra's arrowhead, just a kiss. Mardal's head turned by instinct. Inigo was gone by design. Down the stair into spice and shadow. On the dock a lamp dipped twice. Island's minute started now. Tamsin's grin flashed under the planks. She led them back through the ribwork of the quay quick as thought. No alarm. No shout. Only river, rope and the patience of tide. They walked out normal, the hardest trick of all. Bean Street swallowed them. The jail TV greeted with its patient metal, and Inigo stowed the roll beneath the seat. Lyra scanned street ends, the upward roofs, the habitual dangers. Nothing leapt. They drove. Elise was waiting on the steps as if she'd been woven there. Thorne stood inside, sleeves rolled, eyes knife clear. The ledger thumped onto his desk. Elise had the roll open before Inigo finished saying, "Old apples." She inhaled and grinned, sharp and clean. "Impressions?" Thorne asked. Lyra tapped the wafers. 3. Crisp. Thorne didn't smile. His relief took the shape of a breath held less tightly. Whatever this book says, the city tilts again. Then brace the shelves, Inigo said. We'll keep cooking. Cut nets when we must, Lyra added. Platinum prerogative, Thorne said, and that was both benediction and burden. They made it back to the stall by mid-afternoon. The line had found them anyway. Maddie waved with a ladle. Rico tried not to look like he'd been watching the corner all hour. Inigo washed his hands, tied his apron, and coaxed the fryer flame to its steady, trustworthy shimmer. Lyra tapped salt twice over the first basket. No more, no less. Welcome to Mcronald's. Rico bellowed at the doorway, and the crowd cheered as if they'd slain another monster. In a way they had. Only this one bled ink instead of ichor. They worked until the lamps outside went soft and gold. Somewhere beyond the plaza, clerks would be leaning over the ledger, old apple wafers pressed into soft wax, names rising like bruises under a practiced hand. Here physics told the truth and hunger made peace with it for the price of a coin. When the last tray slid across the counter, Lyra leaned a hip into the pass and let out a held breath she hadn't admitted she was holding. We took the right job. We took the job the city could taste, Inigo said. Same thing, she said, almost smiling. They flipped the sign to closed. The street murmured thanks as it thinned. Inigo scrubbed the flat iron until it shone like an honest mirror. Lyra checked the back latch twice and the window once. Rico practiced his greeting to the empty room and nailed the last word. Outside, Alandra breathed like a beast nearly tamed. Inside, the fryer ticked as it cooled. Between those two sounds lay a city turning, a shelf of jobs waiting, and a pair of platinums who had decided, at least for another night, that the best way to hold the world steady was to salt it evenly and serve it hot. The morning after, the city didn't feel rested. It wasn't the kind of dawn that brought a clean slate. Alandra buzzed before the sun had even tipped the river like a pot boiling over. Runners darted through the lanes, voices raised too high, and even the gulls seemed sharper in their cries. Inside the stall, the air smelled of yeast and hot oil. Inigo set dough to rise in neat rounds, precise as if measuring battle lines. Lyra tied her apron with stiff hands, jaw still set from the weight of yesterday. Rico yawned so wide his chalk clattered to the floor, while Maddie hummed nervously as she washed greens. They felt it, all of them, the pressure, the unseen eyes. By mid-morning, Elise slipped in, not through the line like a customer, but through the side door as though she'd been sewn into the bricks. She looked at the fryer baskets, the flour dusting the counter, and only then allowed herself a breath. You've started a fire, she said without preamble. Inigo flipped a patty. We started a kitchen. Lyra leaned on the counter, gaze narrow. What's burning? Elise set a folded parchment on the prep slate, careful to keep it clear of oil spatters. The seal wasn't wax but cloth, gray ribbon threaded with black. Platinum. Last night's ledger opened names, Elise said. Not rumors. Not whispers. Names. Half the council is pretending they didn't hear. The other half wants it buried under petitions. Meanwhile, Mardal and his friends will know by sundown that the book is missing. Rico froze mid-wipe. They'll come here. Elise shook her head. Not openly. Nobles don't dirty their boots. But they'll send noise. Watchers. Questions. Accidents. She flicked her gaze at Lyra. The guild needs you ready. Tonight. They tried to serve lunch anyway. The line curled twice around the fountain. Students scribbled lyrics to fresh ballads, and nobles pushed coins at Rico until the boy's ears glowed scarlet. Lyra moved with soldier's efficiency, slipping wrapped burgers across the pass like arrows loosed into battle. Inigo manned the friar, expression calm, but his eyes kept flicking toward the street, toward faces that lingered too long, or gazes that didn't belong to customers. By the time the last bun was gone, Lyra's nerves were raw. She dropped her apron on the counter and grabbed her bow. We're leaving the shutters down tonight. Rico looked up startled. But dinner rush. Dinner can rush without us, Inigo said firmly. Maddie, you and Rico lock up early. No exceptions. If someone bangs for food, you didn't hear it. Maddie nodded, eyes wide. We'll keep it dark. Back at the guild hall, the atmosphere was different than usual. Not noisy, not bustling. Tight. The kind of silence that gathers before storms. Elise met them again, this time not with a smirk, but with a ledger hugged to her chest like a shield. Tonight, she said, there's a meet in the Silk Quarter. Warehouse lit like a merchant's gala, music to mask the real business. Mardell's allies gathering to decide who takes the fall. The ledger proves them guilty, but without the cipher ring's key, the tribunal can't read half of it. And Mardell still holds the real ring. Inigo frowned. You sent us to copy it. Copies stall, Elise said, voice sharp. But to break them we need the metal itself. Tonight's meet is the only time he'll wear it openly, on his hand where he thinks it's safest. Lyra's eyes hardened. And you want us to cut it off him? Preferably not with the finger, Elise said. Night laid its velvet cloak over Elandra, lanterns glowing like spilled honey. The Silk Quarter throbbed with music and perfume, nobles swaying under colored banners. From the street it looked like a festival. Beneath, it reeked of coin and treachery. Inigo and Lyra slipped through the edges, dressed not as warriors but as merchants. Inigo in plain but fine wool, Lyra in a dark gown that allowed her bow to fold beneath the fabric. Elise's contact, a tailor's apprentice with clever fingers, had provided the clothes with instructions. Blend with the silk, not the shadows. Shadows get noticed. Inside the warehouse, tables groaned with food and wine. Mardell stood near the center, a ring of smug allies around him. And there it was, the heavy band of gold on his hand, etched with cipher marks, glinting under lantern light. Lyra moved first, a dancer's glide across the room. She lifted a glass of wine, nodded to a noble she didn't know and circled closer. Inigo drifted opposite, near the musicians, his stance casual but his eyes locked. The plan was simple. Distraction then cut. Elise's smoke pellet, non-lethal, faint enough to pass for spilled perfume, would mask the moment. Inigo's knife, small as a paring blade, would do the rest. It worked. Almost. The pellet fizzed, nobles coughed, laughter rose. Inigo slid close, hand steady. The blade kissed the ring, eased it loose. But Mardell turned. Too soon. Too sharp. His eyes locked on Inigo's. Thief, he bellowed, and the music crashed to silence. The warehouse erupted. Nobles shrieked, guards drew steel, tables overturned in a spray of wine and fruit. Lyra loosed an arrow that pinned a banner across the door before the guards could rush. Inigo pocketed the ring and shoved Mardell hard enough to topple him into a tray of roasted fowl. Exit! Lyra shouted. They cut through chaos, dodging, sliding, weaving like dancers. A guard lunged. Inigo tripped him with a stool. Another raised a blade. Lyra's arrowhead pressed cold against his throat, freezing him mid-step. The back alley reeked of smoke and spoiled silk. They ran. Footsteps thundered behind, but the jail TV waited 2 streets over, crouched between barrels like a beast in ambush. Inigo gunned the engine and the machine roared awake. The nobles' guards stumbled back, too stunned to give chase. The Guildhall lights blazed when they arrived, Elise already pacing in the courtyard. Thorn himself waited on the steps, arms crossed. The ring clinked against his desk like a coin tossed into fate. Elise snatched it, relief breaking through her sharp mask. With this, she breathed, the ledger opens clean. Thorn's eyes narrowed on them. You were seen. Better seen than dead, Lyra said flatly. The guild master studied her, then inclined his head once. Perhaps. They returned home in silence, still wired with the taste of smoke and flight. Inside the stall, Maddie had left a note on the counter. Closed early. All safe. Fries tomorrow. Inigo set the skillet on the stove as he always did. Lyra slumped into her chair, bow across her lap. You cook after everything, she said, echoing her own words from nights ago. He cracked eggs, let the pan hiss. Because heat and time don't lie. She smiled faintly, tired but real. Then don't burn it. The city outside kept buzzing, but here at least there was quiet.